Who is this actually good for? Who should skip it? And is it worth the price for normal, everyday buyers? If you've ever tried to swing a club inside a cramped garage and ended up hitting the ceiling, you know the frustration of trying to practice golf at home without a proper space. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's dig into what the Impact Sports Golf Simulator Enclosure actually delivers when you set it up in a real house or basement. First off, the biggest question most people have is whether an enclosure of this size fits into a typical home environment. At just over 13 feet wide and nearly 10 feet tall, the frame is designed to accommodate a full swing without the ball smacking into a wall. If you have a dedicated room, think a spare bedroom, a garage with a clear ceiling height, or a basement with a decent open area, this kit can turn that space into a functional practice zone. For apartment dwellers or anyone whose ceiling is lower than 9 feet, the enclosure simply won't work, and that's a deal breaker you'll want to know up front. The next practical concern is how much effort it takes to get the structure up and running. The package comes as a pre-drilled metal frame with a heavy-duty fabric cover and a 4K screen that mounts onto the frame. Most reviewers who've actually assembled it say the process feels more like a weekend DIY project than a professional installation. You'll need a few basic tools: a drill, a wrench, and a level, and 2 people to hold the frame while you bolt it together. Once the skeleton is up, you slide the fabric over, attach the screen, and you're ready to connect a launch monitor. If you're comfortable with a bit of hand tool work and have the space to lay out the pieces, the assembly isn't a hidden nightmare. If you're hoping for a plug-and-play solution that drops out of the box, you might be better off with a pre-assembled commercial enclosure, which will cost considerably more. Compatibility with launch monitors is another key point. The enclosure is marketed as launch monitor compatible, which means the interior walls are spaced far enough apart not to interfere with the infrared or radar signals that most consumer monitors use. In practice, that translates to a cleaner data readout for swing speed, ball trajectory, and spin when you pair it with popular devices like the SkyTrack or the OptiShot. If you already own a launch monitor, you can slip it in without worrying about signal blockage. If you are planning to buy a monitor later, this enclosure won't limit your options. Just make sure the monitor's own space requirements fit within the 13 by 10 foot footprint. Now, let's talk about everyday usability. The heavy-duty fabric cover does more than just look sleek. It actually dampens the sound of a club hitting the net, making indoor practice less noisy for the rest of the household. Users who have set this up in a basement report that the impact sound is muted enough that neighbors upstairs rarely complain, which is a real win if you live in a multi-unit building. The fabric also holds up to repeated ball impacts without tearing, which is something you discover after a few weeks of regular use. The downside? The fabric can attract dust and occasional smudges from a stray ball, so you'll need to give it a quick wipe down now and then to keep the 4K screen crystal clear. Speaking of the screen, the 4K resolution really shines when you're using a virtual course software. The high pixel density makes the projected ball flight look lifelike, and the larger visual field helps you gauge distance more accurately than a smaller monitor would. For a casual golfer who wants to work on swing mechanics, the visual fidelity adds a level of immersion that makes practice feel less like a chore. However, the screen is a passive display. It doesn't have its own processing power, so you still need a decent PC or console to run the simulation software. If you were hoping the enclosure alone could generate realistic ball flight graphics, you'll need to budget for that extra hardware. One hidden trade-off is the amount of floor space the enclosure occupies when it's not in use. The frame folds down, but the footprint remains roughly the same as the dimensions of the enclosure itself. If your room doubles as a home office or a family room, you'll have to commit that square footage to the golf setup permanently. Some owners have found a workaround by adding a rolling carpet underneath the frame, allowing them to roll the whole unit to the side when they need the floor for other activities. If you're okay with dedicating that space, the enclosure feels like a permanent addition that adds value to your home gym or recreation area. If you need a flexible room layout, the space commitment could be a deal breaker. Value for money is where the Impact Sports Enclosure really starts to separate itself from the competition. At a price point that undercuts many full-size commercial systems, you get a